Donald Trump is attempting to distract us right now with his assault on peaceful protesters in Los Angeles. His continued escalation just goes to show how much he is panicking over a failed agenda and his breakup with Elon Musk. But it's not just that Donald Trump wants to distract. He also wants to claim a fake victory. Donald Trump has always been known to create a problem, pretend to solve it, and then claim victory, which is what he's trying to do right now and why it is so important that independent media call out that lie, which is what we're going to do with an insane post he made very early this morning. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way in supporting the work that we're doing on this channel. Now, before we can get into Donald Trump's insane post and the lie that he told, I want to start with some reporting on the ground, our latest updates from Rachel Maddow right here.
The real mystery is, will he succeed? Will he get what he wants? And the answer to that will not be found by looking at him or by watching his actions. The answer to that question will come from the people of this country. The most important story of our time is this one. What is this country going to allow him to do? This is an attempted authoritarian overthrow of the United States Constitution and the U.S. government, the attempted imposition of a dictatorial regime. That is clear. That is unambiguous. I think it is unquestioned. I think there are very few people on any side of American politics who would contend with that. The question is whether it will work. And the way we will find out whether or not it's going to work is not going to be something that happens in the White House. It's going to be something that happens in the streets and in the courts and in the states and in Congress and in every other place that people are trying to say no. The strength of the movement against him is what will determine our fate as a country. And what we are seeing over and over again in what I believe is the most important story in the country, what we are seeing over and over again is that protesting against him works. That he wants to seem strong, but he is not that strong. Organizing against him works. Fighting him in court works. Pushing back works. Protesting in the streets works. And so Marcelo is free in Milford, Massachusetts, and Carol is free in Missouri, and the 4-year-old girl in Bakersfield, California is free and alive. And in Albuquerque, the movement to keep Antonio here means that Antonio is still here. And none of these things are instant, right? And they don't always work. But pushback is the only thing that ever does work. By Saturday this weekend, we were on to a second day of large-scale protests in Los Angeles against similarly over-the-top militarized raids by Trump's immigration agents. I mean, it started in Los Angeles this weekend, Friday and Saturday. By Sunday, there were solidarity rallies in Bakersfield, California, and in Houston, and a big one in Phoenix and in San Antonio, and again in San Diego, a big one in San Francisco where dozens of people were arrested. People in Pasadena protested outside the hotel where they learned ICE officers were staying during these immigration raids in Los Angeles. I mean, as of Saturday night, Trump had started fulminating against the protests in Los Angeles. He had announced that he would federalize the National Guard. It's the first time a president has done that against the wishes of a state's governor in 60 years. And when it was done 60 years ago, it was to protect civil rights protesters, not to threaten protesters with military force. But, you know, Trump panicking like that, the response of the American people to it has been exactly what you'd think. I mean, bigger protests than ever in Los Angeles, the solidarity protests that I just listed all day Sunday in all those cities all across the country. Today, solidarity protests in Atlanta, across the street from Atlanta's Immigration Court building. Solidarity protests today in Baltimore. Solidarity protests today in Boston and also in Chicago. In Tampa, Florida today, there was a huge solidarity protest. In Raleigh, North Carolina, in Washington, D.C. today, there were protests outside the Justice Department headquarters.
What is happening in LA continues to be deeply disturbing. And late last night, I recorded a video about a journalist who was detained, moved only a few feet off of the site in which they were reporting, but having their hands put behind their back, dragged away by cops only to show intimidation. It is terrifying what is happening right now, and it is so important we continue to cover it and talk about what Donald Trump is really trying to do here. It would be a failure of ours if we did not point out that this is a distraction. We can't just cover the story. We have to talk about why it's happening. Although Donald Trump wants to paint a different narrative, a false narrative, as he did in this insane post right here. Early this morning, Trump wrote, "If I didn't send in the troops to Los Angeles the last 3 nights, that once beautiful and great city would be burning to the ground right now, much like 25,000 houses burned to the ground in LA due to an incompetent governor and mayor. Incidentally, the much more difficult, time-consuming, and stringent federal permitting process is virtually complete on these houses, while the easy and simple city and state permits are disastrously bungled up and way behind schedule. They are a total mess and will be for a long time. People want to rebuild their houses. Call your incompetent governor and mayor. The federal permitting is done." So, of course, Donald Trump is trying to spin this up into some other issue because he wants to distract. Plain and simple. He wants to distract. But it is also important to point out that Donald Trump did not save the day. As LAPD continues to say, not only were the protests peaceful, but they were so peaceful, in fact, that LAPD thanked those who turned out for exercising their First Amendment right, saying that it was only Donald Trump's escalation with the National Guard and sending in Marines to do absolutely nothing. As Governor Gavin Newsom has continued to point out, these are Marines, these are National Guardsmen and women who have nowhere to go. They have no food, they have no water. Donald Trump provided them no federal aid for housing. And so they're sleeping on floors of detention centers, basically on top of each other, and they're having to be guarded by LAPD. So LAPD has said this is actually taken away from their resources by Donald Trump sending these National Guardsmen and women. All they're doing is trying to instigate. All they're doing is trying to create this media circus so we can pretend that Donald Trump did something to solve a problem that he created that shouldn't have existed in the first place. That's what's happening. It's why it's so important that we call out what the true narrative is directly, and we continue to fight back. But it doesn't just stop in Los Angeles, because Rachel Maddow broke down another protest that is coming up. I want y'all to know about it so you can get involved.
This Saturday, it's Flag Day. Happy Flag Day. It's also President Trump's birthday. It's also the day of his big North Korean dictator-style military parade in Washington. More tanks and guns unloading this afternoon outside Washington, D.C. Look at that. Saturday is also the day organizers are planning the next very large nationwide day of protest against Trump and what Trump is doing to the country. Even as Trump panics and inexplicably calls in the military over protests in Los Angeles, this Saturday's protests are being organized by a large coalition of groups and grassroots organizers in all 50 states, all across the country. They're calling it No Kings, the No Kings Day of Defiance. They said this today, quote, "The No Kings mobilizations on June 14th were already planned as a peaceful stand against authoritarian overreach and the gross abuse of power this administration has shown. Now, this military escalation," meaning what's happening in Los Angeles, "only confirms what we have known. This government wants to rule by force, not serve the people. From major cities to small towns, we will rise together and say we reject political violence. We reject fear as governance. We reject the myth that only some deserve freedom." On Saturday, June 14th, more than 1,800 rallies will take place across the country, peaceful, organized, and united. The No Kings movement has posted a map online showing where those 1,800-plus rallies will be held. I should tell you, and I think this is important, of those 1,800, more than 100 of those have been added to the map since Trump announced that he was sending the National Guard into L.A. If he was hoping to get people to not protest, it's backfiring. Organizers are going to hold a series of online trainings this week ahead of the big day. Tomorrow, it's a Know Your Rights training that they're doing nationwide by Zoom so people can better understand how to interact with law enforcement or provocateurs during the demonstrations. Then 2 days later, on Thursday, another big nationwide Zoom call. They're calling it a pre-mobilization mass call. That's for anybody who's planning to participate. Potentially tens of thousands of people are going to be on that call. It's basically just to talk strategy ahead of the big day Saturday. But tonight, as the Trump administration does its best to try to turn the streets of L.A. into a war zone, as Trump's flop sweat and lack of political ideas is manifested in National Guardsmen and now Marines being sent to the streets of L.A., the determination of the No Kings organizers appears to be clear. Many protests, bigger than ever, peacefully, joyfully, everywhere, and unstoppable. There's nothing he fears more.
I don't know about y'all, but now seems like the time to fight. The entire administration has, but it's time to have our voices heard, to get out in the street, and especially on Trump's birthday. He's going to do his little parade. How about we steal his attention that he cares about so much and make sure the focus is on us calling him out. Independent media calling him out. Because we've already seen his attack on the corporate media. Like I said, we covered a journalist being detained last night, and they continued to tell their story right after.
They did grab both of my hands as I was escorted over to the side. They said, "You are being detained while we lead you out of this area. You are not allowed to be in this area." So they took me over to the side. They took down my name. They asked me where I was from. You know, they get your basic information. And I said, "Am I being arrested?" He said, "No, you're not being arrested. You're being detained." And so there's that. As press, these are some of the things that you take a lot of risks as press. This is low on that sort of scale of risks, but it is something that I wasn't expecting, simply because we've been out here all day. I've covered any number of protests, and normally there's the officers put the press, realize that the press is there doing a job, so to speak. And but again, this is what happened. It did not last long. Felt a little longer than what it was, but there you have it. But we are now outside the perimeter, and the protest, at least at this point, is being concluded, getting back to the reason why we're here and reporting on why we were here. They're making a number of arrests of those demonstrators who were left, about a couple of dozen or so. They had put out the announcement that anyone who was still here would be put under arrest for failure to disperse. And so at that point, that's when they took those demonstrators into custody after they had sort of boxed them in. But at one point, we did ask, hey, can we get outside this perimeter so we can get a better shot?
I said this last night, and it still stands to be true. It is insanity that a journalist simply standing and doing their job need to be grabbed by police officers for what? A show of intimidation. If you needed someone to move a couple feet off of a site, you could have told them. But this is what Donald Trump is doing right now. Everything is escalation, and we got to call it out. We're certainly going to be doing so on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.